one day after declaring it liberated from ISIS, which seized control 7 months ago. But local tribal leaders are telling CNN that as much as 1/4 of the city is still controlled by terrorist forces. We're back now with the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. And Congressman, we are hearing this. Iraqi forces have recaptured most of Ramadi, the key word there being most. But do you think that this is a victory that will be long-lasting, that will hold?
I think it will hold. The question is, where does it go next? Are they, first of all, able to clear the city entirely, clear the surrounding areas, and are they able to build on this progress? And one of the big questions there is, and I've still got to get some details on this, how many Sunnis were involved in this assault? How bought into the Iraqi military and the Iraqi government is the Sunni population? Is that reflected in this victory in Ramadi? Will it build and grow? Because that's really the key. They're moving up into heavily Sunni areas. And if the Sunnis still think that the Baghdad government is a sectarian government that is against them, it'll be hard to get those Sunnis to fight with the Iraqi government. That's going to be the key. Whether the next step is Fallujah or Mosul or wherever, the key is to get the Sunnis in Iraq to believe that fighting with the Iraqi government is a better choice than fighting with ISIS. And it's still yet to be proven that that's the case.
You talk about the importance of being able to clear this quarter of the it's still under ISIS control. What are the challenges in doing that?
Well, I imagine it would be very, very difficult because you're up against a terrorist group that they aren't so much trying to hold territory as they're simply trying to commit acts of terror forces. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult to clear the city in that regard, to completely eliminate the enemy forces. It's going to take some time, and it's going to be difficult because they're also not clearly identified. You have to move in amongst the population and figure out who's with ISIS and who isn't. So I think it's going to be a challenge.
We heard from the coalition spokesman that, I asked, is Mosul next? And he said there are other parts of Anbar that need to be addressed. And obviously Mosul is an eventual goal. But he seemed to sort of I guess, put aside this idea that this was, the next punch of the 1-2 punch. Talking to the Iraqi ambassador to the U.S. today, he really had his eye trained on Mosul. So which one would you lean into? Which assessment?
Personally, I think the coalition is more accurate. I mean, what's been true for a number of years is the Iraqis have consistently overstated what their forces are capable of doing, and also they've consistently overstated the degree to which they are willing to truly reincorporate Sunnis into the government and into the military. We've been hearing statements like this for some time, and yet we still aren't quite we aren't close to where we need to be in terms of having a truly coalition government in Iraq where the Sunnis are truly represented. And that's going to be the key, like I said, to building and going forward. So I would listen more to what the coalition has to say. But look, this is important progress, and we can't understate that. Because ISIS has been, for a number of years now saying we're on the march. They're going to build this caliphate. It's going to grow and it's going to grow. And that builds psychological momentum. That makes people want to join them. Well, they're not growing anymore. They're shrinking. And people are less willing to be on a losing side. And we've seen this in some reports about some of the difficulty now in recruiting and people not being as willing to go into the fight with the coalition bombing, with forces that are actually fighting back. It's not as attractive when you're not winning and grabbing more territory when in fact you're going in reverse.
Reuters, I want to ask you about this report. They're saying that ISIS documents that U.S. Special Ops retrieved during a raid in May, that they include everything from how ISIS keeps sex slaves to organ harvesting that they participate in. How valuable will these documents be in further military operations?
I think they'll be incredibly valuable because that's the thing that you have to remember. Ultimately, al-Qaeda in Iraq fell apart in the first place because not only they're incapable of governing, and they govern in a way that is just incredibly punitive to the population. And the people who live under this rule for even a day or two very quickly say, we don't like this. We don't want these guys to be governing us. You give them any kind of reasonable alternative. If the Baghdad government would actually open its arms even a little bit to the Sunni population. They don't want to be with ISIS. These guys are violent psychopaths. They don't know how to govern. They simply know how to terrorize, even the territories that they control. We've got to make that case. We've got to make that clear. This is what's going on in the territory that's controlled by ISIS. It's just incredibly violent behavior against the population. This is not good for anyone who's going to be under ISIS. That's a big part of the argument. But again, like I said, the other part is offer a reasonable alternative. Don't push the Sunnis out of power in Baghdad. Show them that there's a better place to go than ISIS. I mean, ISIS is clearly a horrible alternative, but given a lot of what's happened with the Baghdad government, since we left in 2011, a lot of Sunnis didn't see that as a particularly good alternative either.